Good day or evening. I hope all is well with you. Welcome to Filling Your Soul, living with meaning and purpose through the wisdom of the Kabbalah. It is a great privilege and honor to welcome Rabbi Shneur Silberberg as our guest speaker. Rabbi Shneur Silberberg is the Associate Rabbi and Co-Director of the Hyman and Sonia Blumenstein Outreach Division of the Sarah and Morris Tugman Beis Chabad Torah Center. He, along with his wife Cece, coordinate community-wide educational programs such as the Shofar Factory, Matzah Bakery, and Hanukkah Wonderland. He teaches the very popular courses from the Jewish Learning Institute, and he offers home and office visitations, classes, and assistance and information in all areas of Judaism. He was ordained at Lubavitcher Yeshiva in Brooklyn, New York. As a student, he served in Russia and in Kenya. He spent Jewish holidays in Israeli-American Army bases, taught Torah to inmates in a yeshiva and prison program in West Virginia, and directed numerous summer programs for youth in the United States and Israel. On a personal note, I want to comment. I call Rabbi Silberberg Rabbi Shneur, as he works alongside with his father, the senior rabbi, and so to avoid a confusion, people refer to him as Rabbi Shneur. So I've known Rabbi Shneur for many years, and I've had the opportunity to learn from him. He is an outstanding teacher and a kind and sensitive human being. Welcome, Rabbi Shneur.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be able to speak and talk with you.
Well, I appreciate it. It's an honor for me, and I really appreciate it. So let's begin. Rabbi Shneur, in the Kabbalistic teachings, living a meaningful and purposeful life is a key concept. Can you please share your thoughts about living with meaning and purpose? And if you'd be so kind to share your personal journey that has led you to its fulfillment.
Sure, thank you. I'll respond to the first point. Often people talk about the greatest fears that humans have. And what is typically considered to be the number one fear is fear of death. Often you'll hear how there's the fear of public speaking, which is right up there, and other fears. I believe that the greatest fear humans have is not of death, but rather a life without meaning. I believe that is the greatest fear that people have. It was a documentary I saw once, which really impacted me in regard to this topic. It was about a Israeli military operation that took place in 1981. It was known as the raid on the reactor. At the time, it was a very, very highly kept secret, the whole mission. In fact, for many years afterwards, it wasn't spoken of, in which Israel attacked the nuclear reactor in Iraq at the time. And without getting into the fascinating details of the procedure which took place, in this documentary, the pilots, there were 8 of them, talk about their mission and the fulfillment of it. And one of them, who happened to be at the rear of the group who flew in to eliminate the nuclear reactor at the time, spoke about the fear that he had as he was flying to achieve his goal. And he had reason to be afraid because they were flying over enemy air, and they could have been spotted and eliminated, and therefore he was quite afraid. And then he spoke about, after they had achieved their goal, and it was a very highly successful operation, so then they had to return home. And again, the return home back to Israel was also very dangerous. In fact, in some ways was more dangerous, because at this point, they didn't have the element of secrecy that they had on the way in. On the way in, nobody knew that they were coming in, but on the way out, they had already attacked the nuclear reactor, and therefore their secrecy didn't exist. And on the way back again, they were flying over enemy territory. And so therefore, in many ways, it was a more dangerous journey. And yet, he says that on the way back, he was not afraid. On the way there, he was. On the way back, he was not. And the reason was because on the way back, he knew that he had accomplished the mission that he was sent to do, which was a highly critical mission. At the time, they felt that this mission was one that perhaps would avoid another Holocaust. So he basically says that on the way there, he was afraid. But on the way back, he wasn't, despite the fact that there was greater danger to his life on the way back. But because he knew that he had successfully fulfilled his mission, so he wasn't filled with fear on the return home. And what that told me was that he wasn't afraid of losing his life. I mean, obviously, to a certain degree, he was. But that didn't come close to the fear that he had of not being able to fulfill his purpose and his mission that he was sent to do. And once he knew that he had fulfilled that mission, he really wasn't all that afraid for his life. And what that tells all of us is that when we talk about fear and different fears that we may have, the greatest fear, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is the fear of living without meaning. And which means that every day when we wake up in the morning, the question we should ask is not just, can I live another day, but how can I live with meaning today? How can I live with a sense of purpose, and how can I live with a sense of mission?
Wow, that's an amazing story, and showing that this idea of living with meaning and purpose is a core value that all human beings have.
Right.
Wow.
Absolutely. And, on a personal note, I feel that I grew up in a home which really brought this idea to life. So for me, this comes somewhat naturally, not the fulfillment of my meaning or purpose or mission, but the approach that that's what life is about is something that I saw within my parents. My parents lived and continue to live a life which is dedicated to fulfillment of a purposeful, meaningful living, the teaching of the Torah and spreading it where and whenever they can to whoever they can. So that's how I grew up. And so therefore for me, it was natural, whether it was in my high school years, it was in my early 20s, and after I got married and moving back to join my parents on the mission and purposeful life that they live. And now I jokingly say, going into the family business, but really this family business is about not only living a meaningful life, but trying to provide that type of meaning and purpose to others around us.
And I have to say for me that they provide inspiration to the entire community. And for me, it's made me feel the same way, that they serve as an example that all of us should really be here to serve and to help other people, to be kind and to be helpful to everyone and help them build up people so that they can fulfill their mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Rabbi Shneur, what tips can you offer to listeners that can teach and inspire them to connect to their passion? And when I say passion, I mean something that they feel drawn to and they love, they feel excited about, something like it would be their calling. So connect to their passion and live their dreams.
That's a great question. Obviously, as a rabbi, I use the Torah as a guiding light in directing me in what I should do. In fact, the word Torah, which is translated often as Bible, a lot is lost in the translation, because at the core of the word Torah is hora'ah, is light and guidance. The Torah is not a book of laws. It's certainly not a book of history, although it includes history and it includes law. But the Torah provides guidance and values which I follow, and I try to impart to others to follow as well. But that being said, aside from the Torah, which obviously is the Jewish book of guidance, though it certainly provides values to all people of all backgrounds and all faiths, one of the messages that Kabbalah, and especially the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, which was a sect which emphasized the teachings of Kabbalah to some degree, is the idea of divine providence, in which a person recognizes that I am exactly where I am supposed to be. And considering my unique situation, I am here for a reason, and what I can accomplish, no one else in the entire world can accomplish. Often as on the one hand, the world gets bigger and bigger. There's 7 billion people in the world. And also on the other hand, the world has gotten smaller in the sense that today with social media, you can connect with someone from across the world. You can stay up to date with thousands and perhaps millions of people. And while there are so many advantages to that, one disadvantage is that it's very easy to get lost and to forget one's own value. Because there's millions of people, and a person, quote unquote, on one who's connected to the different social media outlets. Let's say it's Facebook. So a person can see and come across thousands of quote unquote friends or others, and it may make a person feel small. I think maybe as opposed to, 100 or 200 years ago, when a person would live in their little, their town or their shtetl, as you'd say, everyone knew their place. There was the baker, and there was the butcher, and there was the water carrier. Everyone had their part where they knew they played an integral role. And today, because we come in contact with so many people, whether it's in person or over the internet, it makes us feel very small. And one of the messages the Torah teaches us is a very unique statement in the Talmud, which says that every person, and I'll say it in Hebrew, then I'll translate it in English. Chayav Adam Lomar Bishvili Nivra Ha'olam, that every person must say that the entire world was created for me. And that seems to be a strange statement because it comes across as arrogant. That a person should say the entire world revolves around me. And yet the Talmud is not in any way endorsing arrogance. Very much to the contrary. The Talmud speaks of the critical importance of humility. But rather, it's not about that the world that I am the most important person in the world, but rather that the entire world needs my input. Every single person plays a critical role in what they do, and your role cannot be matched by anyone else. And when you take into account the place you are, the people you interact with, your unique talents, and the opportunities you are put in, you truly are unique. You truly have a place in this world that no other person of the 7 billion people can accomplish. So while you have a certain talent, and you may think, well, there are many others who have the same talent as me, and that may be true, but your talent, connected with your family, connected with the people in your workplace, connected with those you come in contact with every day, gives you opportunities to bring light and positive energy and godliness into the world that no one else can. And this is critical for a person to live meaningfully, is to start with the foundation of belief that God put me here for a reason, and this reason only I and only I can accomplish, and no one else can. And that's what it means. The world was created for me. What it means is that the entire world looks to me and says, will you play your role, which is critical in the purpose of all of creation and making the world holier, better, and brighter place. May I share another story?
Yes, love you too. Yeah.
So the story is told about, and forgive me if I don't get the names exactly right, but this story is told about a great composer or a conductor in the early 20th century. I think his name is Toscanini, maybe, Italian composer. And he was a brilliant conductor, composer, and but he was also somewhat of an eccentric person. And at one point, there was a news person who wanted to sort of document his life and talk to him and follow him around and take notes and maybe write articles, write a book. And initially he was opposed to it, but eventually he conceded, and he was followed along by this reporter. So as it turned out, there was one performance that he could not be at. He wasn't able to make it to, and therefore he intended to have his backup conduct the event, the symphony with the symphony with all the various musicians, and he would stay at home. He couldn't make it to the event, but he was going to listen to the performance on his radio, on the shortwave radio. So the reporter asked him, would it be okay if I sat with you while you listened to this performance? And he said, okay. on condition that you don't talk to me, you don't ask me any questions while I am listening, because I will be completely zoned in to the performance over the radio. He said, no problem. So the reporter came at the appointed time. He sat across the table. They turned on the radio, and the performance started. And it was a beautiful performance with unbelievable music and the various instruments, each contributing to the beauty of this of the music, much of which he composed. And after the performance, when it ended, at this point, the reporter turned to him and said, that was a magnificent performance. And he shook his head. He says, no, it wasn't. He said, what do you mean it wasn't? It was beautiful. He says, well, one of the violinists didn't show up. So the reporter looked at him skeptically. He says, there's no way you could know. He says, there's no way you could know, listening from your radio, that one of the dozen or so violinists in a symphony made up of 120 or so musicians, there's no way you could know that one of those musicians didn't come. And so the reporter decided to follow up on it. And the next day, he reached out to the conductor who actually stood in to run the performance. And he asked him, he said, did anybody not show up? Did any of the musicians, were any of them absent? And he answered, yes. Now that you ask, yes, one of the violinists was not there. So later he met again with this Toscanini, and he said to him, he says, I got to tell you, I'm amazed. I'm amazed that you were able to recognize that one musician who didn't show up. And he answered, he said, I'm not sure. He says, you're amazed. You know why? Because you don't really truly appreciate all the music that you hear. You see, you just listen to music and it all blends together. You don't necessarily value every musician that's there. He says, but I am the one who gathered together all of these musicians. I am the one who appointed each and every one. And therefore, if I appointed and if I hired 12 violinists, then that's because I understand the input of each and every one of them. That's the only reason I put them there. And if one of them is not there, of course I'm going to notice, because the only reason I have them there in the first place is because they are needed. And that's what he told this reporter. And the story was shared to me in the context of God being the ultimate conductor. And he puts us all here in this world. And sometimes we may think that what I'm doing, well, someone else down the block is doing the same thing, right? Just like in a symphony, you could have many people playing the same instrument. And yet, they are all necessary. And even though to the bystander, they may not realize why the third or the fourth or the fifth violinist seems to add to the previous ones, but the one who put them there, the one who hired them, the conductor who created this symphony, obviously understands how each one adds to the music which is necessary to create the perfect song. And in many ways, that's us. God is the conductor. God puts us all here, and he gives us all unique talents and instruments. And while it may seem that, well, what I'm doing is not perfectly unique because someone else seems to be doing the same thing, but God says, I put you here only with your input. If you choose to play that instrument, then and only then will the music be perfect.
Thank you for these words. So let's say a person is aware of this concept and it builds their self-esteem, and they know they have all these gifts given from God, and they're going to explore, but they become confused, or maybe it takes a longer time to find the purpose. Would you say it's good to be in touch and in communication and have a good relationship with God and ask for clarification and pray for ways to see which direction to go?
Absolutely, I would say that. And I would say a couple of things. First of all, if you look in the Jewish teachings, it talks of the importance of establishing both teachers and friends. That requires some humility. It requires one to be able to recognize how we cannot come to all of the correct conclusions on our own. And we have to be able to turn to those who are mentors to us and ask them to provide that guidance. Obviously, we recognize that all of it comes from God, but at the very beginning of our Torah, the very beginning of the Jewish tradition, we know that God gave the Jewish people a Moses to be a leader to them. So God clearly established a system in which we are meant to find those who are leaders, to find those who we find not only to be wise, but to be holy. and to ask them to give us that guidance in allowing us to tap into the inner holiness that we have. So we all have that holiness and goodness within us, we call the godly soul. But sometimes we need someone to just shine a little light to remind us of what our potential is and to give us direction. And a friend also accomplishes that. Sometimes friends can tell us that which a teacher or a mentor or even a parent can't. A friend, an equal, but an equal who we respect and an equal who we believe really cares about us is someone who can help us. So a person should not travel alone. And also, a person should not simply say, well, I will turn to God alone. Because although God is, again, the source of all blessing, the source of all life, God created a system in which human beings should depend on one another. And that includes depending on one another for direction in what is right and wrong. So I'd say that is one critical component in finding one's mission and purpose. And a second, and again, I believe this is something which humanity struggles with, I guess always, but perhaps even more so today, is that a person should not allow themselves to fall into the pit of constantly comparing themselves to others. You see that all the time, in which people, look at those around them and kind of assume that the only way I will find gratitude or meaning or happiness is if I live up to the standards of others or live down to the standards of others. A person truly has to find that which makes themselves unique and not compare themselves and not try to live a life in which others will applaud, but rather something which I know will give me that inner satisfaction of fulfilling God's purpose that I uniquely can achieve.
So it's being authentic as well. So
being authentic, and it's easier said than done nowadays because we live in such a show and tell world. Again, going back to social media, is where everyone is busy, advertising their successes and showing their joys and their happiness. And it creates a sense of, well, why don't I have that? And why don't I live that type of life? And why don't I have that type of vacation or that type of car? It's toxic, but it's everywhere. And it takes great strength to say, I'm going to create my own beauty. If you'd like, there's time for another idea, or should we this shorter?
Yes, go right ahead, please.
All right, so this is said, I don't know if it's an actual story, but it has a beautiful message behind it. And it says about a king who wanted to paint a hallway in his palace. And he decided that he would create a competition and narrow it down to the two best artists. And ultimately, those two artists would each paint one of the walls in the hallway. And the one who it was determined had created the more beautiful artistry would be rewarded. And so in the process, they were able to narrow it down to the two greatest artists in the kingdom, and they were each given a month to then paint or sculpt the wall of the hallway. And so one of the artists shows up on that first day and immediately gets to work. And he starts with a paper with a draft. And then after he has the draft, he then goes and gets all the proper colors that he's going to need. In the meantime, the other artist has not showed up. And so they have 30 days to do this. And now 15, 20 days pass. And at this point, the first artist already has a great rendering, and his and the colors are beginning to take shape, and he's making great progress. And again, the other side is blank. The other artist hasn't even showed up. And finally, this is the 28th, 29th. The 29th day, the first artist actually completes the job a day early, with a day in advance. I mean, it's just beautiful. It is beautiful. Every color is perfect, and the perfect blends, and it's really a beautiful piece of work. And the other artist has not showed up. Finally, on the 30th day, the second artist comes. And what does he have? He comes with a bunch of panels of mirrors. And what he does is, on the second wall, he places one mirror after the other. And that all that takes is a few hours. And at this point, when people look, they see two beautiful walls, right? Because one is that beautiful work of art that the first artist worked so hard on. And the second one is the mirror, which reflects that and is now also beautiful. So figuring, the second artist figures he's pretty smart, that he's basically matched his colleague without doing any work. And so the end of the 30th day, the king comes to evaluate and to judge on which artist did a better job. He hasn't seen anything until this point. And he walks in and he immediately sees what happened. He sees one wall, he sees both walls look exactly the same. And he understands what took place, and he makes an announcement. He says, well, these walls look perfectly equal. They're equally beautiful, and therefore you will tomorrow both be rewarded for your work. You can imagine the first artist was livid. After all, he had put in all the work, and the second artist had done nothing. But he has no choice. So they both show up the next day, and the king brings them to his room, his treasure room with a treasure chest, and he shows a big pile of treasures, gold and diamonds, and he turns to the first artist and he says, this is for you. And the second artist says, well, what's for me? And he takes out a big mirror and he hands it to the second artist and he says, here, this is for you. You get to have the reflection of the reward. And aside from the humor of the story, there's a deep message. And that is that often in life, we are not chasing our dreams, we're chasing someone else's dreams. And we are simply living the reflection of what other people value. And we're trying to get that which make other people happy. And we may live and we may build, and we're living the reflection of the pursuits of others. But the sad part is that in the end, we are not rewarded for those endeavors, because the reward also is only a reflection of someone else's reward. We are not rewarding ourselves because we never pursued our personal mission and fulfillment. So if we don't do the work to fulfill our personal mission, the rewards of life will also be only a reflection of what make other people happy. So it's so important to establish what is the gifts that God gave me, and by using them, I will find my personal mission, my personal fulfillment. And then I will have fulfilled my meaning and purpose in life and what God wanted of me.
Thank you for these teachings and also for the clarification. So I have just a couple more questions, Rabbi Shneur. How can we all remain positive and continue to move forward in the face of personal inner and outer challenges that are part of the human condition?
You know, I wish that was a question that could be answered in a short period of time. Yeah. So maybe I'll just mention a keyword. You know, this topic in itself, that question itself can be discussed at great length. But I will say that one of the beautiful teachings of Judaism is that Judaism really requires us to be grateful and to have gratitude, and not just a very basic thank you God for all of the kindness that you've done to me and to the world. But in the morning, in Jewish tradition, we wake up and we begin our day with numerous blessings in which we express our appreciation for all of and very specifically for the different gifts we have, the ability to see, the ability to walk, the ability to talk. It's some people find this strange, but in Judaism, there's Jewish tradition, there's even a blessing which is recited after one uses the restroom. Now, who would think there should be a blessing then? And yet there is. And it's actually quite appropriate, from the most appropriate blessings, because it's a reminder that even when one does something as mundane as using the restroom, one should be reminded of how grateful I am that my body works, and that I have a system which operates, and that I'm healthy enough to do that. And not that we are all perfectly healthy, but there's so many gifts we have which often are completely forgotten, and all we focus on is the pain and the problems we have. And I'm not in any way trying to downplay people's pain, but if a person trains themselves, and Judaism certainly does this, Jewish tradition, in which to not just say thank you, but to be very specific in our gratitude for the different gifts we are given every single day, then that is certainly one of the ways to helping us stay more positive.
Thank you. So I greatly appreciate your participation today. Are there any last thoughts that you can leave with us?
Well, I will say this, and that is that I'll conclude again with a short story that took place one of the great sages of the 20th century was a man who was known as the Radvaz, a rabbi whose full name was Rabbi Yaakov David Willovsky. He lived in Europe, and he once received a very painful but practical question. This was a person who was thrown into somewhat of a prison for reasons which were unfair. But at the time, there was anarchy, and basically he was thrown into prison. And the one who kept him in prison told him that he will permit him to leave prison for one day a year. And so this person sent a letter and a question to this Rabbi Willovsky, the Ridvaz, asking him, now that I am given 1 day of freedom, which day should I take that freedom? Should it be on my birthday? Should it be on one of the Jewish holidays, perhaps Yom Kippur? Perhaps it should be the Passover Seder, or maybe the Hanukkah. And he answered unequivocally. He said, if you are granted 1 day of freedom, you should take the very first day that you can. Because that first day that you can be free and fulfill your mission and live as a Jew and fulfill the mitzvot, the commandments of the Torah, is the most important day of your life. Don't wait, not a single day. Don't wait till Yom Kippur or to Shabbos or to Passover or to your birthday. The first day that you can experience freedom, you should experience it, because that's the most important day of your life. And if you will be able to actualize your mission more so as a free person, then don't wait a day. And that story is so telling, because often when we wake up in the morning, and we kind of assume there are going to be special days on the calendar. Certainly in Judaism there are special days. But the truth is that the most important day of your life is today. If God gave you that day today, going back to the conductor of the music who puts you in the symphony and says, I'm giving you the instrument to play, then today is going to be the greatest performance of your life. And don't push off the significance of today to tomorrow. Recognize the power of every single day.
Thank you. Rabbi Shneur, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Well, I certainly respond well via email, and that is, I have an email address and people are certainly welcome to, if they're interested, to meet with me. My synagogue is the Beis Chabad Torah Center in West Bloomfield, and would you like me to share my email address?
Yeah, if you'd like.
Sure. So my email address is Rabbi Shneur, that's RABBISHNEUR, at beischabad.com, BAISCHABAD.com, and I'm happy to speak or meet with people whenever I can.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Shneur, for your brilliant talk and for taking the time to be with us today to share your knowledge, insights, and wisdom. And may you continue in your work, your good work, with much success.
Thank you very much, Leah. Thank you. And you as well, in your great work.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you who have joined us. If you would like information on other topics, I welcome you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And for my free gift, go to livingwithmeaningandpurpose.com/gift. God willing, until we meet again, wishing you health, happiness, success, and blessings.